There was always something quiet and ritualistic about that little mirrored door above the sink, tucked neatly into the tile wall, usually with chrome edges dulled by years of steam and touch. The medicine cabinet wasn't just for band-aids and aspirin. It held the pulse of the household. You can probably picture it now, its soft glow humming above a porcelain basin, the kind of light that didn't just illuminate but comforted. It turned on automatically when the door cracked, casting a warm reflection in the early hours of morning or the hush of night. Inside were the familiar items of everyday life: a half used jar of cold cream, a bottle of iodine with a stained label, a steel double edged razor resting sharp and clean, maybe a small pair of scissors rusting quietly at the edges. Some families kept a tiny glass tumbler for medicine, others a stash of well folded yellowing instructions for old prescriptions long expired. For many, it was the first thing you saw in the morning and the last before bed. Children stood on tiptoes at the sink, watching their parents navigate the brushed metal shelves with practiced hands. That soft click when the mirror shut, clean, final, remains etched in memory like a lullaby. Not dramatic, not luxurious, but deeply familiar. Today we find sleek vanities with drawers that slide silently or LED ringed mirrors that feel like they belong on starships. But nothing has quite replaced that old wall-bound cabinet with its gentle buzz, its sensible little bulb, and the delicate sound it made when it welcomed another day. It's still out there in some homes, hidden behind coats of paint or forgotten in hall closets, holding echoes of faces now gone and routines once cherished. And somehow, it still feels like someone's reflection is waiting inside, just a breath away. In older bathrooms, when silence was broken, it was often by water. Not a drip, not a hum, but a full-bodied rush that echoed through tiled walls. If you ever walked into a pre-war home or an old hotel and saw a toilet with a tank mounted high above the bowl, you were looking at something once considered the pinnacle of bathroom engineering. The high tank toilet, mounted sometimes as much as 6 feet above the floor. It wasn't just a fixture, it was a spectacle. A long chrome or brass chain dangled from the side, catching the light and mesmerizing curious eyes. Pulling that chain wasn't just part of the process, it was a statement. You reached up, gave it a strong tug, and the toilet responded with authority. A sudden clunk, then a roaring whoosh as gravity did its work. There was no debating whether the flush had worked. You knew. These were common in American homes built before the 1950s, especially in apartments, farmhouses, and city flats. Back then, water pressure wasn't always consistent, and these high-mounted tanks gave the flush that extra push it needed. By using gravity, the design produced a stronger flush than many early low-tank models, and some would argue, even still, than a few modern ones. The visual was unforgettable. Children would stare upward, waiting for the chain to swing back into place. They felt tall, just being able to reach it. The chrome brackets and cast iron supports gave bathrooms an industrial but dignified look, one that felt surprisingly timeless. But as homes began to prioritize space and efficiency, builders wanted fixtures that tucked closer to the wall, that blended instead of stood out. High tanks were seen as old-fashioned, bulky, even a little dangerous in tight spots. And so, like many good things, they started to vanish. By the 1960s, most toilets had lower tanks or hidden systems entirely. Chains gave way to silent plastic levers. Still, if you've ever heard that distinct waterfall sound in an old building, or watched someone hesitate, unsure if they should pull the mystery chain, you know that high tanks haven't disappeared completely. They've just gone quiet, waiting in hallways of history, in guest bathrooms of old inns, or carefully restored Victorian homes. And for those who remember, they're more than plumbing. They're the sound of something getting done right. It stood quietly on the side wall, often in a hallway, just outside the bathroom, or sometimes tucked near the back porch, too shy to be part of the main fittings, but essential, especially in the heat of a southern summer. The cold water-only sink was a simple ceramic or enameled basin with a single spout, delivering a crisp, chilly stream straight from the main line. There was no hot option, no blending knob, just a single faucet, one purpose. You'd come in from raking the yard or hanging laundry, sweat beating at your neck and running down your back. That sink, humble as it looked, might have been the most welcomed thing in the house. You'd lean over, cup your hands, let the water run cool over your wrists. The first splash to your face would nearly make you catch your breath. For a few moments, the air shifted, the heat pulled back, and everything stood still. In many older homes of the 1930s to 1950s, especially in rural areas or warmer states, this fixture did more than its share of service. It helped stretch hot water tanks that couldn't keep up. It gave relief when windows were stuck shut. Children used it to rinse off grass-stained knees. Adults used it to freshen up before supper. It wasn't built for show. It was built for life. Paint would chip around the drain. The metal tap might turn stiff from disuse in winter. But when the sun returned and the house got warm again, that little sink came back into its own. It was quiet, enduring, and practical in the way we rarely design things anymore. Now, most homes blend everything into a single vanity or hide utility behind walls. A sink that serves one purpose, offering only cold water with no apology, feels like a relic. But for those who remember using it, they'll tell you, sometimes just cold is just right. There it was, often off to the side, low slung and oddly shaped. Neither a full sink nor a true tub, just a curious porcelain fixture that seemed to confuse more people than it served. The bidet. In the tiled sanctuaries of wealthier homes, especially those built in the 1940s and 50s, the bidet quietly arrived as part of a growing fascination with European lifestyle and luxury. Imported from France, or at least inspired by it, the bidet was seen through an American lens, not always understood, but often admired. You might remember walking into a grand bathroom that had one and not quite knowing what it was for. Some called it that little extra toilet. Others thought it was for soaking feet. Children made up their own names for it, while guests whispered questions about it in half-joking tones. But for those who used it and truly knew its purpose, it was a symbol of refinement, even if it belonged to a category we didn't talk much about. Originally, bidets were designed to help a person clean themselves with a gentle stream of water after using the toilet. In France and other parts of Europe, this was, and still is, seen as essential to hygiene. But in America, the ritual didn't quite catch on. Cultural conservatism, unfamiliarity, and even a touch of embarrassment kept the bidet from going mainstream. Some people installed them, admired them, maybe cleaned them occasionally, but rarely touched them. And so they sat, elegant, unused, half mystery, half statement. Still, there was something about seeing one, especially in those pastel pink tile bathrooms or hotel suites with golden accented taps, that felt somehow grown up, worldly. They spoke softly of a lifestyle where things didn't need to move fast to be right, where cleanliness was an art and privacy was given space. Today, bidets are making a modern comeback, often built into smart toilets or sold as attachments. But those old standalone versions, with twin faucet knobs and porcelain curves, hold a kind of vintage dignity you don't see anymore. They were products of another time, filled with quiet expectation, even if never truly embraced. And for some, they remain frozen in memory, not just as a fixture, but as a question that echoes back through tiled walls and decades. You might remember it without thinking, just a glance into the corner where tile met porcelain. A small dish, often white, sometimes curled at the edges like seashells, maybe ringed with a thin blue line that had faded to pale gray over time. It was built right into the wall, hugging the tile as though it grew there, not added later. A porcelain soap dish. It didn't stand on a counter or slide across the edge of the sink. It stayed put, and it served one simple purpose: to keep the soap from drowning. Unlike today's liquid pumps and refill bottles, the bar of soap used to be the heart of every bathroom. Ivory, Lifebuoy, Camay. You remember the scent as much as the shape, and this little ceramic cradle kept it safe. Its delicate drain holes were the genius of the design, letting water slip through so the soap didn't turn to sludge. It meant your bar was dry the next time you reached for it. Still square, still strong in scent, with fingerprints in its corners and a little lather clinging to its base. The dish itself felt more like a design choice than mere utility. It matched the sink, the towel bar, even the toothbrush holder, all part of a coordinated set that turned bathrooms into color-cohesive havens. Even its placement had meaning: high enough above the sink to stay dry, low enough by the tub to be reachable during a soak. And if it ever broke, and they rarely did, it wasn't something you could toss. It was part of the wall, an absence you'd notice every time you reached for your daily clean. When soap hit the dish, it made a sound, not loud but sharp, ceramic meeting ceramic. A little clink, like a bell that reminded you someone else had used the sink today. Maybe they had left the water running a little too long, or maybe the mirrors still held their breath. Eventually, plastic took over. Then came squeeze bottles. Then glass pumps with foaming tops that lit up minimal countertops, but couldn't quite match the feeling of that steady little dish. Some call it outdated, others call it quaint. But to those who remember its silent service, nestled like bone into tile, it was something else entirely. It was a tiny display of care, one that greeted your hands each day with a bar that never forgot its shape. There was a time when walls didn't hum, when a room didn't roar the moment the steam rose. Back then, bathrooms had a much quieter way to breathe, one that clicked, turned, and slid open with your own two hands. Crank-operated windows were more than a solution. They were the rhythm of the room. You'd turn a small metal handle, slowly, steadily, and watch the glass pane tilt outward, just enough to invite the world in. Maybe it was a breeze. Maybe it was birdsong. In the spring, you could smell lilacs drifting in. In autumn, it was the sharp trace of leaves and chimney smoke. These windows were popular from the 1930s through the post-war years, especially in compact homes and bungalows. Back then, architects understood that a room needed to exhale, just like people did. Bathrooms didn't always have fans, and electricity wasn't as dependable. So a window, placed just right near the tub or above the sink, did the job elegantly, without noise. The cranks were often made of bronze or iron. You'd feel the weight under your fingers as the gears caught and the latch gave way. Sometimes they'd resist in colder months, needing a little nudge or a drop of oil. Other days they swung open greedily, eager to trade steam for sunshine. For many, it wasn't just about air. It was about pause. You'd open the window and lean in a bit. Let your heartbeat settle. Maybe someone was mowing a lawn down the street. Maybe laughter carried over from the kitchen. The quiet whir of a fan could never compete with that kind of intimacy. As the years rolled on, crank windows began to feel outdated. They were harder to seal, tougher to insulate, and not built for central air systems. Exhaust fans, with their whirring blades and electric switches, took over around the 1960s. They cleared the fog, but they also cleared something else: a moment, a stillness, a connection. And yet, in some older homes, those little windows still turn. Not often, but enough. Enough to remind you what it sounded like when the house breathed along with you. It was never the first thing you noticed when you walked into the bathroom. It didn't buzz, it didn't glow, but tucked into the wall or standing with silent confidence next to the tub, the heated towel rack was always ready. Long before wall outlets became cluttered with cords and gadgets, before timers and digital thermostats ruled the room, some homes had warmth built right into the bones. This wasn't the electric kind that flickered on with a switch. It was hydronic, connected directly to the home's hot water system. As hot water coursed through the pipes, it quietly traveled through the silvery rails, warming them from the inside out. No noise, no light, just rising heat, slow and steady, like the kind that comes from sunlight against old windows. You'd step out of a bath, maybe just after drying off your face with a cotton towel, and there it would be, soft fabric warmed as if by the house itself. That kind of comfort doesn't shout. It doesn't call attention to itself. It waits patiently. You only really noticed it when it was gone. These were more common in homes built with a certain level of luxury in the mid-20th century. Older apartment buildings, some row houses, and well-to-do family homes, especially in colder climates, counted this detail as a quiet mark of refinement. It may not have appeared in every Sears catalog, but those who did see ads for them might remember the way they were marketed. Not as a necessity, but as an indulgence, a modern miracle, hidden in plain view. They rested flush against tile in shades of rose or seafoam, often matching the faucet handles or metal soap holders. Sleek rows of chrome tubing, warm to the touch on a winter morning. Even their appearance was modest, like something borrowed from a train station or hotel lobby, but they served a singular, beautiful purpose. What's surprising is how functional they really were. These racks didn't just warm towels, they helped dry them faster, kept moisture from clinging to the tile, even helped heat the room on especially cold days. And unlike electric counterparts, there weren't switches to forget, cords to unplug, or buzzing noises. It just worked, quietly, because that's what homes did back then. They looked after you, sometimes without asking. Many of these systems were phased out as floor plans changed and hot water systems became more centralized and efficient. Electric towel warmers replaced them, offering convenience at the cost of elegance. Hydronic designs were dismissed as too complex or unnecessary. But every so often, an older home will still carry them tucked in a corner, humming with warmth from another era. And if you're lucky enough to lean against one on a snowy morning, you might feel what someone else felt half a century ago. Not just heat, but care. The kind that doesn't need buttons or beeps, just steam, silver, and time. It was small, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. A rectangle of metal inset into tile or plaster, neatly flush with the wall. It didn't swing, it didn't wobble. It was fixed like it belonged, which, of course, it did. The built-in metal tissue dispenser wasn't just a toilet paper holder. It was a piece of quiet choreography, designed for a time when even the most ordinary gestures were made with care. You might remember the feel of it, the way the chrome cover was cool to the touch, even on warm days. A thin slit across the bottom for pulling clean tissue sheets, folded like napkins, one stacked on the other. This wasn't the round roll dispenser we know today. It was a dispenser for flat tissue, like the kind that came in boxes, waxed paper wrapping, perforated edges. You didn't tear so much as tug. And then, snap. The cover often closed gently, but not always. Sometimes it made a spring-loaded clink that echoed more than you expected. These were more common in mid-century bathrooms, particularly in the 1940s and 50s, when design wasn't just about style. It was about making everything feel built in, considered, neat. You might see them in modest homes, high-rise apartments, or even in upscale department store restrooms. They were part of a matched set, often installed alongside coordinating towel bars, robe hooks, and even cup holders. All chrome, all shining, all matching. There was something permanent about them. Something that said, this belongs here, not balanced on the back of a tank or standing loose on the floor. They didn't shift when bumped. They didn't unravel onto the tile. They served their purpose, then waited quietly to serve again. Tissues of the time were often marketed as gentle, hygienic, and modern. Ads with smiling housewives promised comfort and class from every sheet. But behind the soft language and floral boxes, there was still the hardware, clean, precise, and built to last. By the 1960s, the rise of the round roll became standard. It was cheaper, easier to package, and could be replaced faster. Tissue boxes got brighter, the holders got flimsier, and the shine began to fade from what had once been a small piece of bathroom jewelry. And yet, if you peer inside a forgotten guest bathroom or the last untouched corner of a basement powder room, you might still find one, still set in tile, still gleaming just a bit, still waiting to be opened and heard again. There was a time when rest wasn't a reward. It was a rhythm, built into the end of the day, just like locking the doors or turning off the porch light. And for those lucky enough to have one, the foot bath attachment on a clawfoot tub made that rhythm feel complete. Unlike today's bubbling spa basins and gimmicky massagers, this feature didn't need electricity or essential oils. It simply borrowed from what was already there: the tub, the water, the warmth. A small extended basin, sometimes built into the foot of the tub or designed to be filled separately, offered a way to soak just your feet without filling the entire tub. And for people whose days were spent walking, bending, lifting, and standing, that was more than enough. You'd fill it halfway, tug the handle gently, and allow warm water to snake its way down into the curved bowl. The steam would rise slowly, catching the edge of the mirrored cabinet or the glass above the vanity. It was a private pause, a quiet approval from the house itself that you'd done enough for one day. Store clerks, mail carriers, mothers, bakers. This was their 5 minutes. Knees drawn close, arms wrapped around calves, souls easing into the scentless solace. These footbath attachments were most often found in American homes from the 1930s through the 1940s, especially in places where clawfoot tubs hadn't yet been swapped for built-ins. The tubs themselves already carried dignity, a certain sculpted grace. But the addition of a footbath made it feel thoughtful, like the designers knew exactly how a person unwinds. Some even had basic jets, powered not by electricity, but by hand or water pressure. Others were just shaped specifically for ergonomic comfort, built low into one end of the tub, with a gentle incline that let you soak without strain. That attention to simple physical ease reflected an older understanding of home before the words self-care were printed on lotion bottles or turned into trends. By the 1950s, floor space began to win over flair. Combined showers and bathtubs took over, and smaller homes eliminated extra features to make way for newer conveniences. Clawfoot tubs went out, taking their attachments with them, and with them went the regular ritual of the footbath, a practice now saved for spa menus and special gifts. But in an old farmhouse or forgotten upstairs bathroom, sometimes the remnants still linger. A small discoloration in the porcelain footprint, a secondary drain, stained with time. And every so often, if the house is empty and quiet, you might even find one intact, waiting not for attention, but for someone to sit, to pause, to remember how good it felt to take the weight off and let the water do the rest. It wasn't grand, it wasn't fancy, but tucked just outside the bathroom, maybe across the hall or beside the sink, stood one of the most reliable little corners in the house: the linen closet. Usually with stiff wooden shelves and a door that creaked no matter how much oil you gave the hinges, this wasn't a place you'd invite guests to admire. But it held something better: warmth, order, familiarity. Inside, stacks of towels, carefully folded, sometimes uneven but always clean. Washcloths with softened hems, sheets with floral prints, faintly older than the mattress they belonged to. And in the back, bars of unopened soap wrapped in waxy paper, filling the air with something floral, something powdery and pure. But it was the light that made it special. Just inside the door, dangling from a socket above your head, hung a small brass chain. Tug it gently, and with a soft click, the bulb above would flicker to life. No switch on the wall, no dimmer, no motion sensor, just that pull. and the glow that followed wasn't bright. It was just enough. Enough to light the cotton, enough to find the towel you wanted without waking up the house. You might recall the feel of that chain in your fingers. Cool, slightly dusty. If you pulled too fast, the bulb might rattle. If you didn't pull hard enough, nothing happened. There was a rhythm to it, and every part of the process felt rooted in another time. Linen closets like this were common from the 1940s through the 1960s, when builders designed homes with practical storage in mind. They weren't about square footage. They were about function, a space to keep things ready, a space that always had what you needed: clean sheets after a long day, or a warm towel when the water ran cold. Some even had a scent that stayed for decades. Not strong, just comforting. A blend of fabric, lavender sachets, old paper labels. If you opened the door too quickly, it greeted you like a memory. Familiar, quiet, consistent. Today, most modern bathrooms skip the linen closet. Towels are rolled onto open shelves, displayed like decorations. Closets, if they exist at all, are built into bedroom walls or tucked into stackable drawers. But gone is the click, the pull, the hum of that little glowing bulb above its cotton kingdom. For those who remember, it wasn't just a closet. It was the sound of softness, the smell of home, and a reminder that care doesn't always shout. It just waits, folded and ready, under one gentle light. Above the sink, nestled between carefully aligned tiles, sat a small fixture, often white, sometimes pink or seafoam green, that you might not have noticed unless you were reaching for your toothbrush. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't loud, but it was part of the wall itself. A toothbrush holder, built right into the tile. It usually had 4 or 5 rounded notches, perfect for holding skinny wooden-handled brushes upright. No wobbling cups, no cluttered counters, just order. You'd slide your toothbrush down into its place, bristles facing the mirror, and it felt complete. There was structure to it, routine, a kind of silent discipline that sat with you during your morning and evening rituals. These tile-in toothbrush holders were especially common from the 1930s through the 1960s, showing up in bathrooms shaped by simplicity and matching ceramic hardware. You'd find similar matching features, like soap dishes or robe hooks, cast in the same color, sealed into the wall as if they'd grown there naturally. And they often did match, because back in those decades, bathrooms weren't just built, they were coordinated. The bristles back then were often made of nylon or boar hair. The handles didn't boast battery packs or Bluetooth. Most were slender, modest, and entirely manual. But they did the job, and when it was time to put them away, the holder offered a spot defined by design. It allowed for airflow underneath, drying your brush upright, gently distancing each one from the next. There was something grace-filled about it. A shared space among siblings or spouses, yet everyone had their own small groove, familiar and unspoken. You knew which slot was yours. No name labels were needed. By the 1970s and beyond, bathroom designs trended toward flexibility over fixtures. People wanted new styles, easier replacements, and more countertop space. And so the built-in holders began to vanish. First the toothbrush slots, then the matching soap recesses, towel bars, and beyond. In their place came plasticky cups, disposable trays, spinning organizers, and the age of chrome and acrylic. But every so